Conor McGregor.
There he is.
A name that we don't talk about enough, right?
You're right.
I'm sure our audience is just loving that we talk about Conor McGregor. They're like, man, there's one thing we haven't heard enough of. It's that damn Irishman.
He finds ways to stay relevant.
And much of this question is because we've discussed pretty much every option for Conor McGregor as they've presented themselves. It seems like every week, Max Holloway or Michael Chandler, Nate Diaz, Tony Ferguson, someone is saying that they should be the next fight for Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
So after weighing all these options and discussing them on this podcast, right here, right now, you are put, Dominic, into the shoes of one Dana White and Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby. You are the whole show that matchmaking meeting. You get to decide who you, as the UFC, put Conor McGregor up against in his return bout. Let's say July timeframe. Who do you put him up against and why?
No, we have to do the trilogy with Nate Diaz, man. We still have to capitalize on this while it's still relevant, because eventually it's going to become irrelevant. As much as it's crazy to say that because it's Nate Diaz, it's Conor McGregor. But that's just the fact of the matter, because the sport in the UFC is going to continue moving and chugging along like the train that it is. So let's get Conor McGregor. He's coming off of a skid. He's coming off of an injury. Nate Diaz, still a huge star, but on a skid, right? He's lost a few in a row now. They're one apiece. We need the trilogy to be settled. There's still beef there. They talk about on Twitter at least once a week. It's basically a date at this point that we see. So yeah, that's the fight that has to happen. I still think that at both points of their careers, I think it's a competitive bout, regardless of like the age difference. And even Conor coming off the injury, I still believe he can win that fight. And I do believe Nate Diaz can beat Conor, especially the Conor we've seen of late. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I'm not one to just catapult Conor back in with title contenders, even guys like Michael Chandler. While I love that fight, I think I even said it during the voice message we got from Tyler, I would love to see it, but not first for Conor. And I said this after Conor lost to Dustin in January. I think I said it when he broke his leg and lost in July. And here I am on December 1st saying it as well. We got to get the trilogy with Nate Diaz, man. Let's settle the score. They'll both get a huge pay-per-view to put under their belt, to add on to their records. That's the fight to make for me, man.
Yeah, no doubt that would be the biggest fight you could probably put for him at this point. I mean, that fight's still huge. It's still shocking that they've never put it together.
I know.
It's just
crazy.
But if I'm being honest, I'm actually going to go with a different option, and mostly because I want to give two different answers.
Yeah.
But if I'm really thinking about it, even though I would probably be the most excited about him versus Nate, in all honesty, I think people, just because Conor, I know he lost cleanly to Dustin, the first of these two bouts they had in 2021, he lost very clearly, got finished. Second fight, I know he broke his leg, but I mean, he was losing the fight up to that point, whatever. I think he's being a bit overlooked or counted out as like as a threat. I don't think that's really fair. I mean, I do think that Conor McGregor is still a contender in the lightweight division. So while I agree with you, I'm not going to put him against Michael Chandler, even though I just said Conor McGregor is still, in my eyes, probably a contender. But coming off a terrible injury like that, and back-to-back losses, you got to work your way back up. You know? And I would rather, I guess, long-term, if I'm in the UFC shoes, I want to put him in a lightweight fight, because ultimately, if he wins one or two bouts, he's probably right back in title contention again. So I'm going to put him against a fight that should have happened, or a fight that was booked to happen a long time ago. Him versus Rafael Dos Anjos.
I love that fight.
You know, Dos Anjos is a great fighter still. You know, he's one of Dana White's probably favorite guys, in the sense of a guy that really he's a good test for anybody. He really shows you what you have in that moment. If you can beat RDA, you can probably compete for a title. If you can't, you probably can't. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think a fight with him and RDA Conor, that is, in RDA is a great fight. There's a built-in story that they were supposed to fight at UFC 196. That is where RDA had to pull out like 2 weeks before. Nate Diaz gets the call, and that's why him and Nate Diaz had those 2 bouts. So I think that's like a great fight for him to come back to, because RDA is like not quite a contender, but he's like kind of right there.
Yeah.
And he's also not the finisher of like a Michael Chandler. This is what I kind of worry about. Conor is there's going to be some ring rust or some getting, because I'm a believer in ring rust. I mean,
yeah.
But when he first steps back in there, you know, he's coming off a terrible injury, back-to-back losses. He wants some time to kind of, you know, get the feeling back in of being in the octagon. So you go up against Michael Chandler, that dude's going to come out like a man on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And try to take your head off right away.
Oh, yeah.
While RDA, you get more of that. RDA, I'm sure, will bring the fight. And I'm not saying that Conor's going to win that fight. But RDA will at least kind of – he's not quite the finisher or the explosiveness as a fighter to – I don't think get Conor out of there in round 1.
Yeah.
You know, you'll probably have a bit of a slower fight to start. Conor will probably be more to one, judging kind of the pace, and then it'll pick up as it goes.
Yeah.
I think it's a great fight, does good business for the UFC. If Conor loses, though, I mean, what else is there for him?
Can I pose a question based upon that matchmaking? Because this thought just rolled through my head as I'm sitting there.
Yep.
Because Conor McGregor is a main eventer, right? I mean, that's what he is ever since. I don't even remember how many it's been in a row now. But it's like, is he ever going to get to the point again where you can't justify him as like a main? Like, if he came back and were to fight RDA, is that a pay-per-view main event? Like, realistically, do you think they would do that because it's still Conor? And like, if so, if it is, do you think we ever see the point where Conor's still in the UFC, but not a 5-round main eventer? Like we see Conor in a 3-round fight. I just want to get your thoughts.
So I do think him and RDA is enough to be a main event. If they did it with him and Cowboy Cerrone, you can probably do it with him and RDA. But excuse me. That's an interesting. That is an interesting question. I think if he were to lose to like an RDA, I mean,
you still have the Nate one, which they would do a main event, obviously. But like, you know,
truthfully, I think Conor will no longer fight in the UFC
if it gets to that point.
Gets to that point.
Yeah, that's probably
if the UFC ask him to be. You know, that guy's ego is not going to let him. It wouldn't even allow him to take a replacement fighting spot.
Yeah,
he wouldn't be a replacement fighter. He said, "I'm not a replacement fighter."
Yeah,
like okay, I mean, so obviously the guy's ego is going to kind of prevent him from doing anything like that. I would say. I mean, as much as I know he's passionate and loves the sport, but I would honestly, if it got to that point, I think he probably maybe tries to pivot into like some sort of boxing career. Like, you know, there was an interesting theory that maybe him versus Nate 3 doesn't end up happening in MMA, but it ends up happening in boxing. Because I don't know how many fights Conor has on his contract, but, you know, Nate has 1.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of interesting if those two had a boxing match as their third fight. But, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that, like, is him and RDA a main event?
Part of me is like, no, but at the same time, like you do have the built-in story. It's still Conor at the end of the day. RDA is not like a star, obviously, but he is a former champion. He's been there and done that with a lot of great guys. Yeah, it would probably turn into a main event.
You have to think of the storyline of Conor's comeback fight.
Yes, of course.
Right now, we look at it and we're like, but you got to think of how much the promotion's going to ramp up by then.
They would tie in some of the old stuff.
Remember how we weren't all that hot on him versus Dustin 3.
Yeah.
And then once they started building it, it's like
we're like, fuck it.
Here, take my money.
Right. So but I do agree, like if he were to lose that, then he fights Nate. And if he were to lose that, it's like, okay. We can't keep putting him in main events because people are just gonna not really justify him being an elite guy no more. And he probably just doesn't fight at that point because he ain't gonna be on a fight night, I'll tell you that much. And I doubt he's gonna do a 5-round featured bout like Leon and Nate did. So he's got to be on the marquee. And I just think that, and it's not like to his detriment. It is to his detriment, and it's not, because he's made the bag. He's the biggest star that MMA's ever seen. But it is weird if you start losing, it's like, oh, what do I do? Do I keep fighting and not be a main eventer, or But yeah, I agree with you there for the most part.